Welcome to Exponentially Elevate Your Leadership Impact, the podcast for those who are ready to lead boldly, live authentically, and multiply their influence. I'm Dr. Stephanie Dugan, a 30-year educator, speaker, mentor, educational leadership expert, and best-selling author. My passion for leadership started early, influenced deeply by the strength, grace, and unwavering work ethic of my mother, a 40-year high school teacher. She showed me what it means to lead by example with purpose, resilience, and heart. And that legacy fuels everything I do. I've spent my career empowering women in education and organizational leadership, and I created this space for individuals just like you, purpose-driven, passionate, and ready for more. Each month, we'll welcome incredible guests to explore mindset shifts, leadership strategies, and transformational stories, all grounded in my signature leadership dance framework, to help you lead with clarity, confidence, and cultivate cultures of trust, dignity, and lasting impact. Whether you're leading a team, an organization, or simply the next chapter of your life, this is the place where leadership expands and impact multiplies. Let's get started and exponentially elevate your leadership journey by empowering each other to serve with goodness, lead with greatness, and cultivate cultures of authentic leadership. Today, our guest is Kristina Heagh-Avritt. She is the founder of Vibrant Family Education and co-host of the Bringing Education Home podcast. With over 30 years of experience in teaching, mentoring, and family development, she helps parents create joyful, value-based learning environments where children thrive in mind, heart, and spirit. After nearly 3 decades in traditional classrooms, Kristina witnessed firsthand how overcrowding, rigid policies, and teach-to-the-test mandates limit students' potential. Her turning point came during the pandemic when she realized her greatest impact came not from teaching students, but from coaching parents to lead their children's learning with confidence and creativity. Today, Kristina empowers families to reimagine education at home, blending real-life experiences, hands-on learning, and modern tools with timeless values like compassion, integrity, and curiosity. Her approach honors each child's unique learning style and helps parents cultivate deeper connection, resilience, and a lifelong love of learning. Welcome, Kristina. I'm so glad to have you here.
Dr. Stephanie, thank you so much. It is an honor to be here on the show with you.
Well, it seems like that our paths kind of have a lot of similarities in it and a lot of parallels. But first and foremost, coming from the classroom and now with the journey that you're on today, we heard a little bit about it, but is there anything else that you'd like to share about your story and your journey before we get started?
Well, the journey has just been really, really interesting. I never thought I would leave the classroom. I
Mm-hmm.
always thought that I would retire from the classroom, that it would be one of those things that, I would just, do what all the teachers do, have the retirement party in the library and
Mm-hmm.
have all the kids come back and all those kinds of things. And then when I decided to shift and move out on my own, that was a
Mm-hmm.
really interesting way to end my career and that really face new challenges and really develop my leadership even more. So it has been an amazing journey. And of course, it's still one unfolding.
Well, and so many teachers, I was one of them, that you get comfortable, right? You get comfortable in your classroom. You get comfortable with the schedule. You get comfortable with having 20 minutes for lunch and having to schedule when you go to the bathroom. And it's all part of the process. And you love the students that you have from beginning to end, and you see their growth. But you were exactly right, as we mentioned in your bio. Education has really shifted from when you and I were in school, when it was focused on reading, writing, arithmetic, and you had PE. My gosh, PE is not very, very popular any time now. But I truly agree with you about the teach to the test mandates. So how did that? So show me, explain to us during COVID, when you saw the overcrowding, rigid policies, and teach to the test mandates, what really was there one thing that just all of a sudden, you know what, this is not working? Because I know for me, when I decided to leave education, there was a moment when I finally realized, you know what, it's time for me to exit and do something else.
So actually, I have to back up about 2 years because actually, what happened during the pandemic, during COVID, I had just transferred into the online school in my district, and I was helping to create the
Mhm.
kindergarten through second grade program. So it was perfect timing. It just worked out the way it did. So I didn't have the same challenges as the other teachers who were just thrown online and like make it happen kind of thing. But to
Mhm.
answer your question, the 2 years before, the reason I switched from the traditional classroom into that online school was exactly that. My parents couldn't come into the classroom and help me anymore because they had upped the regulations on parent helpers, background checks, and things like that. It started costing money, etc. And I understand we have to keep our children safe, but at the same time, they were making it a barrier for parents to come into my room and help me and see what their kids were doing. And then also, they were telling me that I needed to be on a certain chapter, on a certain page, on a certain day in a curriculum. And if my kids didn't get it, oh, well, just keep moving forward. It's like, that's not why I became a teacher. I became a teacher to make sure that kids got to mastery, that they understood to the best of their ability, and they could move forward. So that's the teach the test, right? And then when they said, oh, yeah, by the way, here's your test prep packet, it's like, but you're taking 6 weeks of learning away from my children, away from my students to do this test prep packet. It's like that's not how I teach. That's not, that's not helping the kids be successful learners as well. So all of that stuff just kind of mixed together was one of those things like, I need to get out of the traditional classroom. Let's try the online school. And then, like I said, whenever I found out that even though I was teaching in the online school a lot to the kids, I was coaching parents at about half the time because, of course, they're more involved with the online school. They have to make sure their children log in. They have to make sure that their children get the assignments done and those kinds of things. They would come to me as like, I can't get my child to do this. I can't get. It's
Mhm.
like, okay, well, that's no problem. They don't want to write on their paper. Awesome. Do you have any expo markers? Do you have any dry erase markers? Can you take them over to the big sliding glass door and let them write their story there? And they're like, we can do that. It's like, yes, if you want your child involved in loving
Mhm.
learning, let's do that. And they said, but then how do we turn it in? It's like, you take a picture of the window and you send it to me. And they're like, oh my gosh. So when I was doing those kinds of things and helping
Mhm.
parents realize that they had more power, more control than they really thought, yeah, all of it just made sense. And then I started my journey with the Vibrant Family.
Well, in your journey and your flow, somebody can probably relate to their parallels about, maybe I had a frustration and maybe things weren't just going the right way. And, maybe I made a transition and then I found a new opportunity. So, that flow is something that I think a lot of us experience because I always had folks. So, well, when will I know? How do I know if it's time to leave? Or how do I know it's time to make a transition? And I told him, I said, you will know exactly when you know. I mean, it's just going to hit you, just, like a lightning bolt. It's going to hit you when you know that it's time to go or to shift or to transition.
Mm-hmm.
So you said a couple things there. And the first one that I want to share is that, you were being told from external sources about, all right, you can't have these resources because we've got these checkpoints. So now you're on your own, or you have to teach at this time frame or this level. You had all of those restrictions because what a lot of individuals don't realize is that yes, we have leadership positions of title, if you will, that are on every school campus, whether it's K-12 or higher ed. You've got these individuals that are in these leadership positions. But the thing that I also like to share is that being a leader is not about a position or title. It is about how you influence others. And so, as the teacher, you are the leader of your classroom and you're the one that's responsible for the success of those that are in there. So kudos to you for realizing that, you know what, this is not okay. This is not okay for our students. We can't put all of our square kids in round holes. It is not going to work because they learn at different levels. They have different skills. They have different experiences. They have different perspectives. And you have to have that multi-dimensional experience, and following something that rigid is not something that we can do. So I love that you shared that. So with that piece, before I get into the second one with leadership, so when leadership for you as a teacher becomes difficult, how did you reconnect to your purpose? Because sometimes when you get that, it's just that itch that you're like, oh, this is not going to work. This is not going to
Mm-hmm.
work. So did that transition help you reconnect, or was it just kind of a flow that you're like, I'm getting there. I feel closer, but now I found what it is. So share that.
Wow. Actually, I left teaching out of desperation because I
Yeah.
was so frustrated. I was just
Mm-hmm.
like, I can't believe I have to do it this way. I can't believe that they're not listening to me, a teacher of over 20 years experience with great track record kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh
Mm-hmm.
my golly. So yeah, I actually left the traditional classroom out of desperation and into that online school. And then when I got in that online school, and I could do things a little bit more my way because, like I said, I was helping develop that K2 program. I felt
Mm-hmm.
that connection again. But then it was like, you know what? It's really time for me to do something different. I'd been kind of looking actually for about 10 years. So, I taught
Mm-hmm.
for almost 30 years. I've been looking for almost 10 years. But yeah, it was just one of those things like once I left, it's like, okay, my passion is helping families, helping kids. And then I started digging into my own history, which is really interesting, which connected me with purpose of what I'm doing with Vibrant Family now even more.
Oh, I love that. All right. So, I mean, we're still unpacking things. So I'm going to kind of go back and forth because I
Okay.
love that you shifted, that you left due to desperation because that's a whole other avenue. But let's go back now to you came into the online space. You were teaching the students, and let's remind the audience, these were K2. Is that what you were saying?
K2. Yes.
K2. All right. So they can't do these things all on their own. I mean, they probably could now because it's the digital age. But in K2, especially when you have to have certain technology and certain permissions and certain access, the parents are definitely involved. And so you were right that you were having to teach the students, but you were also having to teach the parents
Mhm. Yep.
how to do all these things. So, what an incredible opportunity that turned out to be. So, how did you create that connection and that bond? Because I know from my own experience when we had COVID and my kids had to go online, and I'm tech savvy. I mean, I'm an educator, I've got a doctorate degree, I can figure things out, but there were still things with the tech dealing with a certain school on a certain piece of technology with a certain program
Mhm.
that there were challenges and I would get very frustrated. So by the time I reached out, I was already at a frustrated mindset. So, how did you, one, and I don't want to say deal with it, that's not the term I'm looking for, but how did you nurture that parent when they came on and they were possibly frustrated? Then to walk them through the process of something that might have been challenging tech wise. And then we'll get into the instruction piece in a second. But
Okay.
just navigating that challenge.
I love this question because it actually also brings out part of my story. I was actually the technology coordinator for my brick and mortar building for 15 years.
Mm,
So I
mhm,
had done a lot of tech strategizing and things like that. And so when those parents came to me, the first thing I would say to them is that I'm here to listen. I
mm,
understand it's frustrating. I understand you feel like your child isn't making gains or can't get in or whatever. I am here to listen. And even though they were most usually frustrated with a text something, it was
mhm,
usually an underlying something like their
mhm.
child wasn't paying attention or they were
Yeah.
cooped up in the house together and the kids were driving them nuts or whatever, 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 right? Or the parent was having their own struggle at that point. And so just being that really good listening ear and letting them kind of get their frustrations out first and then stepping into how can I support you emotionally and mentally because it was a big
Mhm.
strain on a lot of parents during COVID, during the pandemic. And then how can I share my screen or make the login easier or send you a special link or whatever you
Mhm.
needed to make the technology work a little bit better. So that combination usually worked.
Well, and it sounds so unlike other tech support, if you will. Most people in tech support are all about tech. So they speak the language of tech. They want you to speak the language of tech. It's all tech, 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 and all these
Yep.
acronyms and words and letters and characters.
Yeah.
And from you coming from the nurturing side, because you are an educator first that was into tech, is how I'm envisioning it,
Yeah.
is that you were able to diffuse the situation
Mhm.
and let them know that you were there to be a support. And so that's a life lesson right there
Yeah.
is, don't already have those expectations set up, come in as a listener. How can
Mhm.
I support you? And then that will change so many things. And so you also talked about thinking outside of the box, the creativity and lesson planning. And I think a lot of individuals get into teaching for that purpose. How can I support these students in their learning journey, getting them from point A to point B and understanding their learning styles? I have a son that has a vision impairment, and so he doesn't need to see everything. I mean, a flow will help because he's not blind. He has just an impairment, but it's not just he has an impairment, but he is an auditory learner because
Uh-huh.
that's what he did when he was little.
Exactly.
And we will have parents or teachers all the time. Whenever we would have parent teacher conferences when he was young, they're like, he is just not paying attention. He is not looking at me. He is not doing this. And I said, he doesn't. He is listening to every single word that you say. I mean, my child can be 4 rooms down in our house, and my husband and I are having a whispering conversation in the kitchen, and he'll
Yep.
answer.
Uh-huh.
So I love the fact that you were able to help the parents who probably are thinking about their own schooling. How did I learn?
Mhm.
Sitting at a desk with a pen or piece of paper, and a piece of paper, looking at a book and answering the questions. Answer the question, write down the question, answer whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And for you to say, "Hey, can they write on the glass door?" And they're like, "How cool is that?"
Hmm. Yeah.
So, how many strategies? I'm just curious. Did you ever keep track of all the strategies, or how did you brainstorm, or was it, tell me what supplies you have at home and let's come up with something? I mean, how awesome is that?
Yeah, kind of like that, right? And then it also went back to my preschool experience and things like that. But so like they're like, oh, we want it's so beautiful outside. We want to be outside. Awesome. Take your sidewalk chalk outside and do your math equations on the sidewalk. They're like, what? It's like, yeah, go
Mhm.
take your sidewalk chalk and go outside, right? Oh, they don't want to read when they're sitting at the table. Awesome. Let them read in the middle of the floor because they aren't going to distract anybody because they're not in the middle of a classroom like other kids.
Yeah.
um, all of
Mhm.
those kinds of things. And then just the parents realizing that I wasn't so strict to the how to get it done as much as are they learning and can you show me growth? Because I was able
Mhm.
to, because of the online setting, have a little bit more flexibility as to what I could accept and what I could see and things like that. There were certain things that just had to be done the way they were, right? But then
Mhm.
also the creativity is that, a lot of people like K2, they can't sit still long enough in a regular classroom, let alone on a screen. It's like,
Mhm.
well, that's when you start singing a lot of songs. You do a lot of
Mhm.
hand motions, you do lots of things, and you have fun activities that bring them to you that they don't have to necessarily learn. So every once a month we would have what was called a dance party. And we would literally get like little dance videos, kid bop videos, whatever, up on the screen. They would be on the screen. We'd all be standing up in front of our computers, dancing and doing the motions and doing this and that. And they absolutely loved dance parties. They couldn't wait to
I
get
want
there.
a dance party.
It's so much fun.
Taught high school and college. I want a dance party.
Exactly, right? And then we would do, because we couldn't do regular field trips, we'd do online field trips, or we would have lunch with teacher. So we would just come online and they would be sitting there with their snack or their lunch, and we would just be talking about whatever. And again, building that community, building that connection so that when I did have to ask them, I really need you to sit down, pay attention to the screen right now for this lesson, it was easier because that connection was there.
That is just such an amazing story, and ideas and thoughts. My kids had this incredible second grade teacher in public school system. Her name was Heather McKenzie, and I want to share her name. She's been on my show in the past, but she is a national board certified teacher, which is an incredible journey that she had to go
Yeah.
through. But she is also a whole brain teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so when she had my boys in the classroom, I have one that is, absolutely gifted, and I have one that has challenges, but he is so darn smart. But you have
Mm-hmm.
to figure out how to get into his smartness, if you
Yep.
will. That's not a word, but we're going to say it is today. But she had flexible seating in her classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of the coolest things I remember seeing in a classroom, is that someone wanted to sit on a yoga ball, and someone wanted to lay on the furry rug, and someone wanted to go, and she had these little pockets
Mm-hmm.
and pods in her classroom, and everything was like you said, they were moving, there was movement and there was sound and there was singing. And oh my gosh, my son, my oldest, was just awarded star student of his school, which is, the highest ACT at the school, and he picked his second grade teacher, Miss McKenzie. All the other
Oh,
kids every year always picks a high school teacher, but he picked
yeah.
her because she was really the one that opened his eyes to, like, oh my gosh, look at all the
Mm-hmm.
cool stuff I can do with my learning journey.
Yeah.
And so here we go. So I love that so much. Love that. So it's getting creative. It doesn't have to be boring. I mean, I love learning too. So we went through all this process, and you said at one point you left the classroom due to desperation, and that's when you made that shift originally.
Yeah.
So, a lot of individuals, they, as we mentioned before, in this comfort zone. And
Mm-hmm.
you typically don't want to get outside of that comfort zone for fear of failing or for
Yep.
fear of change or for whatever fear. And sometimes it takes desperation to get
Mm-hmm.
out of that. And once you cross that line, then there's a lot of opportunity. It's new, but
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of opportunity and being uncomfortable. So kind of share that space because, there's fear, there's discomfort, there's desperation. So kind of
Mm-hmm.
share how can we support others that might be feeling that way now? And what would be some things you tell them as they walk through that journey?
I think one of the biggest things is whenever you're so in love with what you do, teaching and helping parents,
Hmm.
and then knowing that you can't do it the way you used to,
Hmm.
that's where the desperation came in. It's like,
Yeah.
I just can't be in this space anymore. And there's a
Yeah.
big long story about an administrator that was a real jerk and things like that. And,
Yes.
all sorts of stuff like that involved
Yeah.
as well. But when you get to that point, it's like, okay, let's see what else is possible. And like I
Yeah.
tell my parents now, lead with curiosity. You might be desperate, but you're going to lead with curiosity. What is possible? What could it look like? Can I make a small shift? And at that point, I couldn't make a small shift because a small shift would have been moving to another school. Well,
Right.
the same rules would have been there.
Hmm.
Different curriculum or different, community, different principal, etc. But the same big overarching rules would have been there. So
Yeah.
that small shift wouldn't have worked, right? And so that's when I took that bigger shift into from the classroom into the online. But a lot of that
Yes.
stuff was still there. And so then when I had to really jump out and do Vibrant Family, a lot of it had to do with support. I have a husband that
Mm.
loves me dearly, and he's like, I can't see you like this anymore.
Yep.
Do what you need to do. We'll figure it out, right? I mean, I was so desperate. I was like, I don't care if I have to be a Starbucks barista right
Yeah.
now. That's
Exactly.
how bad it was, right? And so then when he said, no, let's do it. Let's develop Vibrant Family. Because we've been talking. I mean, being an educator and thinking big range, wide scope, everything, we've been
Mhm.
talking for years about, wow, if we could start our own school, this is what it would look like. If we could do our own thing, this is what it would look like. And he's like, it's time. Let's just see what we can do. And so that's what happened. It was one of those things. I led with curiosity. I thought about everything we've been thinking about for years. And then it's the support of a spouse that is amazing.
And this segues into exactly where I was hoping to go next is, we talk about being in these spaces and the restrictions and, being tied down, if you will, and being told what to do and not having any flexibility. And you kind of found your niche with supporting parents in that online space. So tell me more about Vibrant Family Education. So kind of do an overview so that our listeners can hear, what is it? Who is it for? You just shared how it got started. It got started out of desperation because you wanted to do more and support and be creative and curious and, all the things that we're wanting for our kids as they're coming up through the educational sector, but kind of walk us through a little bit of how it really came to fruition.
So yeah, when I left, it's like, what can I do that would really help support parents? And it's like, wait a minute, I have this awesome knowledge that I was just given. I know how to support parents in a role in educating their children because of the online school. I know everything I know from my 20 plus years of being in the classroom. And I know that there are many parents who were hoping that maybe they could branch into homeschool as well. So Vibrant Family Education is really about supporting parents to make an education move, change, whatever you need to do that's going to make education be the best fit for your child. So, as Vibrant Family developed, I work with families who have to stay in the school district for some reason, right? They just can't
Mhm.
take that big leap into homeschool. And so then I kind of give them ideas. So, for example, I had a parent call me up and was like, I can't believe this teacher, they put their hands on my kid. I'm really, really upset. I'm going to go in and just start yelling. And I was
Mhm.
like, knowing from the teacher standpoint on the other side, it's like, what if your child didn't let you know everything about the situation. Could you
Mhm.
go in with curiosity instead? You can go in angry, you can go in upset, but is that really going to help you? Could you go in and say, I am frustrated because this is what I think happened? Can we get some clarity around whatever, whatever? And he was really glad because he did it. It went in with curiosity and found out that yes, the teacher had done something wrong, and the child had also been playing parts of it, that two sides of the story. And because he went in
Yes.
with curiosity and asking questions, he was able to move farther with the principal, with the administration. He was able to get a resolution that he was happy with. His child knew that, yeah, next time maybe telling the whole story might be a good idea instead of just the part that really made dad mad, kind of thing. So just knowing that around that, I can help families there. But my passion, biggest thing of all, is for all those families who are stuck and like, school's not working. I've tried almost
Mhm.
everything. I really, really want to homeschool, but I don't feel confident enough. I don't think I understand enough. I don't think I can be the best teacher for my child, is to help make that shift and help parents understand
Mhm.
what they need, who they are, and how they can be the most important thing in their child's educational career.
So, I mean, you've just unpacked such a broad range of opportunities there because you mentioned, yes, your support for the parents who have students that are currently still in public schools or private schools or what have you. They're being educated by someone else, but there are some struggles.
Mhm.
And, I've always been fortunate that my husband and I both were in education. So we kind of know the lingo and what goes on. And being a teacher myself, I know that there are two sides to every story.
Yeah.
Of course, you think that your kids are the most awesome thing in the whole world. So they've never done anything wrong. But, you still have to listen to both sides of the story.
Mhm.
But one of the things that you did, and this kind of feeds into some of the things that I do, is you asked an individual with this parent who was upset and ready to go in to pause. You ask them to respond rather than react.
Mhm.
And that is something that it can be learned over time, but that's not something that everybody does because you get tied up in the emotions so
Mhm.
quickly. I
Yeah.
mean, all of your input from your body, all of your stimuli has to go through the emotional center before it can go to the logical analytical center. And so
Mhm.
that's why you're always flying off the handle at first. But I love that you are teaching one of your strategies is to pause and talk about curiosity. Neil deGrasse Tyson is, I just love some of the things that he says, and that it's, lead with curiosity. As you
Mhm.
mentioned, it's just
Yeah.
being curious because you can learn so many things. You don't know everything. Some
Mhm.
people think they do, but we don't know everything. And so if you just lead with curiosity and ask more questions, sometimes it's a matter of we have different perspectives or we grew up in different places. One of the things that I always talk about when I'm on a stage is, you know, when your perspectives and experiences aren't taken into account, then what we think about can be very different and how we respond can be very different. So I live in a town of less than 2,000 people. We have one four-way stop. I know your town is much smaller, but in our one four-way stop, if somebody says, "Oh my gosh, can you believe the traffic?" There might be three or four cars at the stop sign or a tractor or somebody's
Mhm.
cow got out or something like that.
Yes.
I grew up in Houston, Texas. And so when I think of, can you believe the traffic? I think of I-10 with 27 lanes across back to back during rush hour.
Comfort of number. Yep.
So your perspectives are different, but it's both
Mhm.
about traffic. So being able to pause and be curious, you can learn those nuances and those differences, and that can help you get on an even playing field before you move forward. So that is just amazing. But then the homeschool piece, um, share with me, homeschool is amazing for a lot of students. And during COVID, everybody was homeschooled. I mean, whether you like it or not, everybody was homeschooled during COVID. But coming back from COVID, some students had some really big challenges getting into school. And
Mhm.
so some students were pulled out and they were homeschooled. That was the term that was used, but they weren't. They weren't
Mhm.
educated at home.
Yeah.
There were others that were parts of programs that were really incredible at home. So I know that there might be some listeners who are like, homeschool, that's for the birds. I'm not gonna. So share what you feel is the adequate definition of homeschool. What is it supposed to be? because I think that there's different perspectives of what people think homeschool is and what it should look like.
I love this question, and it goes into the three things I love talking about with parents and people, and as a podcast guest, about all the different things. But homeschool is that learning journey based from your home. It does not mean pick up school, a desk, a chair, a specific curriculum, and plop it down in your living room and make your child sit there like all of their friends and neighbors. It is not that. Homeschool is when you finally are able to really tie into your child's strengths, their learning styles, their curiosities. Yes, there is curriculum you can buy and use to help do that. But more than that, homeschool is that connection where you get to educate your child. We're not talking academics, we're talking life skills. We're talking emotional well-being. We're talking spiritual well-being. We're talking physical well-being. Because when you look at homeschool in that lens where you are educating your child for the rest of their life, it is amazing what can happen. And again, that curiosity. Yes, you can use curriculum, you can use books, you can use paper, etc. But when you start breaking away the layers of what you think you have to do, like 6 hours of learning every day, well,
Sitting
six
in front of a
hours of,
computer all day long.
yeah, no, that's not what homeschool is anymore at all.
Mm.
So yeah, it's just all of that. But homeschool is basically being with your child and learning and exploring.
So, and as a parent for homeschool, do the parents, in your opinion and in your experience, do the parents have to be stay-at-home parents to be successful with homeschool? Is that the best way
It's
to
the
do it, or?
best way, but it's not the only way.
Mhm.
It's one of those things, and that's part of one of the things we talk about is a lot is I don't have enough time to be a
Mhm.
homeschool parent. And the thing that we get into there is that you're not tied to a 8:30 to 3:30 learning time. You
Mhm.
are now completely flexible. Learning can happen when it needs to happen for yourself and for your
Mhm.
child, right? So maybe you do work, but learning the academic part can happen evenings, weekends, whatever. And then
Mhm.
whoever's helping you care for your child, maybe it's your parents, maybe it's an aunt, maybe it's a hired caregiver, right? But they can still have that child be doing all these life things that they learn from along the way if you think you have to specifically do the teaching. But like you said, there's so many online curriculums and things anymore. If you have it set up with your caregiver, they can make sure the
Mhm.
child logs in. They can make sure that they're doing their online lessons and getting that part done. So then you can have the funner, that's not a
Fun
real
stuff.
word, the more fun stuff after like the baking and the cooking and the whatever, right? So to answer your question directly, yes, a stay-at-home parent makes it easiest, but it doesn't have to be.
Well, and when our kids see us in that lens, and you mentioned that you can break out, we're educating through the life skills.
Mhm.
Life skills are so important. And way back when, again, I'm going back to so many years ago when I was in school,
Mhm.
we learned how to say please and thank you, and, we're modeled different behaviors, and, taught how to communicate and how to interact, and, all of those pieces that we don't necessarily have today, because you had very strong structure in the home. Maybe it was your church or other spiritual organization or in the community, or what have you. And now that's being left up to the school because it's not being done at home. So the fact that you can educate, have those life skills through the emotional, spiritual, physical, the parents are really the models.
Mhm.
And even if your kid's in traditional school or not, you're still the model. And that phrase, the apple doesn't fall very far from the tree, is so true. And as an administrator, I
Yes.
have seen a student and then their parent walks in. I'm like, yep, I know who that goes with.
Yes, that
And they think
happened
they're
to
so
me a
different,
lot
but
as
they're
well.
not.
Yeah, yeah.
Think they're so different. So tell me about the life skill piece. Have you had experiences where parents are like, "Oh my gosh, I've seen such a difference in my child because we've shifted the way that we do things, whether I'm providing more support through your services, whether they're still in school or providing more support now that they're out of school. Do you have any stories or anything exciting that you would share just from experiences that you've had over the years?
I do. And one of the families that I worked with, it was a mom of five kids, actually. And it was pretty amazing because if you think you're going to homeschool five kids, that's even more daunting than the one or maybe two
Mm.
that
Mhm.
that a lot of families have, right? But this family was in a school area that was just unfortunately not a great fit for them. Several of the kids were being bullied, several were behind in their academics, several were totally disengaged from school because they just like, I can't stand what's happening around them. And so the mom was talking with me and she's like, Kristina, I don't think I can do this. And not only do I don't think I can do it, my school said I couldn't. They said they couldn't take, I couldn't take them out of school. It's like, excuse me? That's not true. You absolutely can. But we're going to skip over that part and go to the little girl who was in third grade. She was behind in reading. She couldn't read. She couldn't really get the words and things on the page to work out right. And when her mom finally took her out of school, she got to a space in her home without the extra pressure, without the bullying, with the safety and security of knowing that she was loved and cared for. Her nervous system finally calmed down. Her brain finally kicked in. And within 3 months, she had caught up. And by the end of the year, she had excelled past her regular reading peers and is now an avid reader. Her mom said she wouldn't even pick up a book when they left school. Now she's reading all the time and she loves learning by reading as well. So it's just one of those things that when we look at what's really good for our kids, if they're in a situation where they're not confident, where they're constantly feeling behind, if they feel unsafe, are they really learning to begin with? And that's something parents really need to focus on and think of when they're looking at education changes.
That is such a powerful story because we assume, or parent, I'm not going to say we, some parents assume that I'm dropping my child off at school. You take care of that.
Mhm.
I'm not the teacher. You're the teacher. So you and the school and the leadership take care of whatever it is.
Mhm.
Don't call me. I've even had a parent say that it's before 3 o'clock. Why are you calling me? They're
Mhm.
yours during this time.
Yeah.
So it's finding out that individualized learning. That's exactly what you're talking about,
Mhm.
and bringing down those triggers. So one thing that I've talked about in the past with other guests is, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And I'm sure
Mhm.
that as an educator, you're fully aware. Those that are not, it's a pyramid that we have where the base is, your first level of safety and security. That if those needs are not met, that they can't go up to any other level. So if we expect our students to learn and have curiosity and be creative, if they don't feel safe, if they are bullied, if they are scared, if they are nervous, they can't do any of that. And a lot of individuals don't realize that. But that also translates not only to school, but into workplace and organization and families. With the work that I'm doing now on organizational culture, so I'm a leadership cultural strategist, that with that, it's the same thing. If your employees don't feel safe in that space, if they feel like they're bullied, if they feel like they're not appreciated, if they feel like they're not successful, or that you're just going to come at them, or they don't know how you're going to come at them,
Mhm.
they're not going to feel safe enough to be creative, to want to stay. They're going to look for another job like you did and
Yep.
like I did towards the end. So, how can we create those spaces, which I think is so important? So, as I mentioned, leadership isn't about a position or title. So, parents, you are the leaders. You are the leaders in your home. And how are we going to support those individuals who are around you where you're truly leading people, as individuals and not just, whatever else you think they are? So, what are some foundational skills? What are some things that families can build early that could really support their students? And again, all of this translates to leadership and to business and to organizations and to life. So what are some, you talked about the big three. So, I mean, this might not be the question to really focus on your big three, but what are some foundational skills? And then I definitely want to hear about the three pieces you're always talking about.
Awesome. So yeah, so foundational skills, it is really about building that love of learning, right? So
Mhm.
whenever you have a child who wants to learn and explore, feed that curiosity, because the more they are curious, the more they are interested and happy about learning, then it really translates into more being stuck in their brain and being able to be accessed later, right? And
Right.
that doesn't mean that we're sitting down doing worksheets at 4 years old or 5 years old, right?
Hmm.
What I'm doing and saying is a foundational skill is learning through play. Make sure you're playing the games with them. Make sure you're taking them on nature walks. Make sure you're out in the community and learning and exploring and finding out all sorts of different things, right? If they say, oh my gosh, I want to find out about space, awesome. Bring home some books about space and let them read and dive into it. Let that curiosity lead their learning and growing those foundational skills. And I'm not going to be popular here, but having your child on a tablet, having your child on a phone, having your child on digital devices at a very, very young age is not a foundation. I know there are so many things that are put out there as, oh, this is a learning game, so it's going to be fine. But I want you to think of it as like this. Whenever a child learns to read, that actually begins at age 2. Learning to read starts at age 2. And people are like, oh, wait, no, 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 no. A 2-year-old can't learn how to read. It's like, yeah, but guess what? They are getting those foundational skills. When they are on a walk and they're noticing the different textures and colors, the difference between the leaves and the summer and spring and fall, when they're using their hands to grasp and move through the park, those are all the skills that their eyes and their brain and their body needs to be able to learn later. Turning the page, differentiating, all of those different things. So you are truly helping your child learn to read when they're only 2 by having these different experiences. So as foundation skills, play with them, talk with them, share vocabulary, have fun with numbers, counting, etc. And that's for the base, the really, really young ones. If you're like, oh, wait a second, I'm already past all of that. My kiddos are 8, 10, whatever, right? You can
Mhm.
still back up and do those fun things with them. Find the games that they like, find the activities that they like, and feel vocabulary that enriches them each and every day.
Such gold nuggets that you've just shared. Because I'm the same way. I'm like, don't just throw the iPad in front of the kid at the dinner table. Please don't. People aren't going to like me either. My kids don't have anything digital in their room. I mean, they are 16 and 17, so every once in a while they have their phones. There's no TV. They don't have a game, anything in this house. So it's all about, connecting, human connection. And so, what role does communication play in building that trust with a family? Because some families are like, oh, I don't know if I can handle them again. I don't want to have the arguments. I don't want to have, those types of struggles because it's going to be a balance between authority and connection through learning at home because you're the teacher, but you're also the parent, but you're also everything else. So, anything that you'd like to share in that space?
I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of what you talk about when communication isn't just reacting, it's
Hmm.
responding. You're listening, you're thinking, you're not giving answers, but you're trying to figure out how to help them maybe develop answers as well. And again, there's different levels. Of course, the earlier you start, the easier it's going to be because those expectations, those communication examples are all going to be there in front of them. If we're
Yes.
starting a little bit later, it's one of those things that you can't make big, huge, drastic changes all at once because then everybody's going to be miserable. But we're
Mhm.
going to do something little bits at a time. As a matter of fact, people who leave the public school and move into homeschooling, we actually tell them you're taking a month off. You're forgetting
Mhm.
academics. You're forgetting everything about school, and you are learning how to enjoy life as a family. First of all, that settles the nerves, settles the nervous
Mhm.
system, allows some of those structures and things that were so ingrained and so hard for the families to kind of let go of. They get to find a little bit more of their family routine. So, for example, children learn best in the morning. They're going to know, oh, yeah, a little bit later, whenever I actually set up academics, we'll do it in the morning because that's when they're learning
Mm-hmm.
best. If they realize their kid is an after school or afternoon learning kiddo because they need to get all their energy out in the morning by running, playing, et cetera, awesome. That's how we're going to set up their schedule. But they need that month to kind of figure that kind of thing out. And that communication piece is really, really huge in there. It's about learning how to talk to them a little bit differently because you're around them all the time now.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's so great that you said, take time off, because that structure that they've had for years, especially if it's an older child, is ingrained. One thing that I get so frustrated about is that, not every student needs 12 worksheets on the same thing to understand the concept. And my son, who has some challenges, part of his IEP is that he doesn't have to do the busy work. If you can see that he's mastered the content, don't give him the extra busy work, because that freaks him out.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
And
yeah.
so, yeah, so I love that, this is an opportunity for parents to, one, get to know your children, two, you're understanding how they learn. And not everybody learns like you do. So I'm just throwing that out there, because that's the biggest thing that I see, especially in college classes, is they aren't creative enough with the students because they're teaching how they were taught. Because the
Mm-hmm.
majority of college professors didn't go to a formal education to be a teacher. They simply have an advanced degree in the area they are teaching. So they don't have those skills. So,
I'd forgotten about that. Oh my gosh.
yes, yes.
Okay.
So as you get higher and higher, once you've left K-12, university teachers, very few of them have formal education to understand how to break things down and look at pedagogy and look at learning styles. And so that's why for some students, there's such a transition to go from K-12 to higher ed. One thing that I didn't mention to you, I was on your podcast recently, which was awesome. But one thing that I didn't mention is that whenever students are going into that higher ed space, as a dean, as a former dean,
Mm-hmm.
our homeschool students would do so much better than our traditionally educated students, because they had those life skills. They understood how to ask the questions. They understood how to be curious. They understood how to interact with an adult and have the manners, and that things are not all the same as they always are. So our homeschool students were usually some of the most successful students that we had, unless they were the ones that were pulled out and the parents said, here's a computer, go do your work and just let me know how you do. So I mean, that you do have both spectrums, but the truly um, focused students of those parents who embrace what homeschooling is about are the ones that would come to us just so much farther advanced, and usually younger than the other students that came to us, because they were able to complete the curriculum sooner.
Yep, exactly.
But in our conversation, you mentioned three topics or three things that you always share. Have you been able to share those today, or would you like to share something
Most,
in addition today?
yeah, mostly. So the one of them is not enough time, and we definitely reached that one. We talked about that one, how we rearrange the schedule, things like that. The second
Mm-hmm.
one we talked a little bit around, but we haven't quite exactly hit, is that parents are their child's first best teacher. And we've alluded to that. You start
Yes.
teaching them from the time you bring them home, right? You teach them to walk and talk and everything else. And so for you to think, I can't be their teacher, doesn't make sense, because you're actually teaching them all day, every day. Now, that's not to say that you might be the best math person in the world. But guess what? When you're homeschooling, you don't have to be the best math person in the world, because there is tutoring available. There are co-ops available. There are private teachers available. And believe it or not, the School of YouTube is pretty awesome. And you learn a lot with your child, and then you learn it together, and then you improve your skills as well. So you don't have to worry about not being the teacher. And that's one of the myths that unfortunately our United States does and says a lot, is like, you can't be your child's teacher because you don't have a degree. Please, please,
Not true.
please. Not true. Especially
Mm-hmm.
because you do so much teaching in other ways besides the academic. You can get around the academics, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was number two. And I think I hit that one enough, especially with our past conversation. Number three, though, is just really, really interesting. My child will be the weird one, or my child will be unsocialized if I homeschool. If you listen to what we've been talking about all through this conversation, unless you are a parent, like you said, who just kind of puts them on a computer and doesn't really interact with them, right? Doesn't take them out for experiences, which most homeschool parents, that's not what they're about. They're about creating a life for their child where they are capable learners. So think about this. When they're in public education, we say they're getting socialized when they're put in a classroom with a whole bunch of people the same age with varying skills, but mostly the same kinds of skills, lack of communication skills, etc. And that's not the way real life works. So instead, if you're able to homeschool them and you're able to take them to the food bank and interact with lots of people, if you're able to go to your church groups and interact with lots of different people, if you get to follow their passion and go to the fire station and interact with all sorts of different people, right? If you're an entrepreneur and you're taking them to the personal development and the entrepreneur activities and events that you do, they're getting a whole nother education, and a lot of those kids will walk right up to those adults and be able to talk to them even though they're 10, 11, 12 years old. So it's so funny. And all the homeschool videos, you see people constantly on reels and stuff, that same thing. They say, oh, well, what about your child not being socialized? And then they show a picture of their child talking, interacting, and doing, whatever. So that was number 3. And it's just so funny.
That is such an important point. Because yes, so many people say, well, I'm not going to homeschool. They're going to be the weird one, or they didn't have any friends, or they didn't have this or that or the other. Well, and what I would say, again, pulling my hat back on as a college dean, I would have students come into my office after they've been absent, whatever it was, they'd have to come into my office. And I would ask a simple question like, okay, well, what class are you talking about? Oh, I don't know. Okay, well, what's the teacher's name? I don't know. You've been in class for 6 weeks and you don't know your teacher's name? Well, no. So just because you've had a formal education doesn't mean that you are learning how to socialize. That is a skill that can be taught. It's not always modeled well. And unfortunately, with our electronic devices, we tend to go inward whenever we have free time. We don't always go outward. I mean, I don't know about you. When I was a kid and you didn't have anything else to do, and there was somebody sitting next to you with nothing to do, you'd start talking.
Uh-huh.
But now with these devices, we don't do that. We really focus inward, or we just want to have that silence. So whether you're in school or whether you're out of school and you're homeschooled, no matter somewhere in between, this is a place where, modeling, where learning how to speak to others, where building that community is all essential in the skills that you need to move forward. So we are almost out of time. So we only have a couple minutes. So I'm going to ask one last question of you. And if you can answer it briefly, is what is next in your leadership journey or in your journey, and how can people support you or reach out to you if they want to know more?
So what is next? Oh my gosh. So vibrantfamilyeducation.com is where you can get a hold of me all over the place, or Facebook, Kristina Heagh-Avritt. But at that website is the events calendar. So all my summits and speaking engagements, everything like that. My free gift to you, the audience, of 10 simple steps of education at home is there for you as well. Be curious, come visit me. I'm excited to tell you more.
Oh my goodness. Love that so much. And do you have one word or phrase of encouragement that you'd like to share with others who are listening?
Be the empowered person that knows what they want and find a way to do it, especially for your children.
Love that. Again, be the model. Be the model and communicate. That's what we always talk about. So thank you so much, Kristina, for being with us. This was amazing. I think that we could have talked for another 3 hours if we wanted to, but so thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Exponentially Elevate Your Leadership Impact. I hope today's conversation left you feeling inspired, empowered, and ready to take the next step on your leadership journey. A huge thank you to our incredible guest, Kristina Heagh-Avritt. for her wisdom, her experience, her authenticity. And if you loved what you heard, be sure to connect, follow, and continue the conversation. We are building a leadership movement, and your voice matters. If today's episode resonated with you, I invite you to grab a copy of my book, Exponentially Elevate Your Leadership Impact, a year-long journey to reflect, strengthen, and elevate your leadership. Your weekly guide to confident, authentic, and purpose-driven leadership. Again, you don't have to have a title to be a leader. Any interaction and influence is making you a leader. All of that is available on Amazon or through my website. If you're ready to go even deeper, whether it's booking me at your next speaking event or diving into a leadership program or simply connecting, head over to www.drstephaniedugan.com. I would love to hear from you. And let me leave you with this powerful reminder and my mantra, which is serve with goodness, lead with greatness, cultivate cultures of authentic leadership. Until next time, keep leading with heart, stay courageous, and always do good.